Introduction to trig functions. We're about to introduce a new type of function called a trig function. Well, we need to know what sort of thing can go in to the function, and then what will the function send out. Well, at least for now, the only thing that can come in to a trig function is an acute angle of a right triangle. That's pretty specific, so I have to have a right triangle, meaning a triangle with a 90-degree angle in it. And what I'm allowed to stick into these new functions is one of the acute angles inside. Remember, acute means less than 90 degrees, so I can't stick in the right angle. I can only stick in one of the two acute angles. I know that these are acute angles. The sum of the angles in a triangle adds up to 180. I already have a 90-degree angle, so these other two angles add up to 90, which means each one, of course, is less than 90. So what comes out of these trig functions? Well, the answer is a ratio of two of the sides of the triangle. A ratio is like a fraction, so what you get out of a trig function is a fraction. The top will be one of the side lengths, and the bottom will be another side length. Let me do some labeling on my picture that will help me talk about this a little bit more. You remember that in a right triangle, the side opposite the 90-degree angle is called the hypotenuse, and the other two sides are called legs. I want to distinguish between them, so I'm going to call the leg opposite angle theta here the opposite leg, and I'll call the leg right next to angle theta the adjacent leg. Well, all we're saying back up here is we're going to be sending an angle into our trig functions, and what we're going to get out is a ratio, a fraction, made up of two of these sides. It's not too difficult to figure out that there will be 6 ratios possible, right? 2 with the opposite on top, 2 with the hypotenuse on top, 2 with the adjacent on top. 6 ratios possible. That's why there are 6 trig functions. I've written down the names of those 6 functions here in this box. Let me show you how they work. The first function is called the sine function. Now, all of the function names are kind of long, so they all have abbreviations. We abbreviate sine, S-I-N. Don't read it sin. We still read it sine. If I want to stick an angle into the sine function, I write sine of theta. And as soon as I write that, by the way, let me just point out that this is the same thing from algebra as when we write f of x. So you might remember that f stands for the function name, and then the x in the parentheses stands for the input slot, the place where you would put the input. It's the same thing here. The sine, S-I-N, stands for the name of the function, and theta is in the input slot. You say, where are the parentheses? Sometimes we put them with the trig functions, sometimes we don't. But sine of theta is just like f of x. Well, if I dump theta into the sine function, what do I get out? I know I get out some kind of ratio, and specifically the sine function gives me the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse. So measure the opposite side, measure the hypotenuse, form that fraction. That's what the sine function gives. Each of the rest of the functions does something similar. Each one sends out another of those ratios. So the cosine function is abbreviated COS, and if I stick theta into the cosine function, what I get out is the ratio of adjacent over hypotenuse. The tangent function is abbreviated TAN, and what I get out from the tangent function is the ratio of the opposite to the adjacent. Sine, cosine, and tangent are definitely the big 3 in terms of trig functions. They're the ones that are used most often. The other 3 are certainly still used, but these are the big 3. There is a made-up word that people use to help remember these definitions. The word is SOHCAHTOA, and it stands for sine is opposite over hypotenuse, SOH. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, CAH. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. And so you can use SOHCAHTOA to help you learn those definitions. The other three trig functions send out the reciprocal ratios of the first three trig functions. Reciprocal just means flip the fraction upside down. I've listed them so that you can see which functions pair up. So sine essentially is paired with cosecant, cosine paired with secant, and tangent is paired with cotangent. In other words, these other three functions simply return the reciprocal ratio of the function they're paired with. So the cosecant function, which we abbreviate CSC, cosecant of theta, returns hypotenuse over opposite. It's just the reciprocal of what the sine function gave us. The secant function, abbreviated SEC, secant of theta, returns hypotenuse over adjacent, the reciprocal of the cosine function. And then cotangent of theta, COT is the abbreviation, returns adjacent over opposite. Again, the reciprocal of what the tangent function gave. So in terms of memorizing, I would say a couple things. For sure, memorize the big three. Use that SOHCAHTOA to help you. And then memorize the pairings. If you know, for example, that cosine is paired with secant, knowing that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse means, of course, that secant is simply the reciprocal, hypotenuse over adjacent. Thanks for watching.